And I'm here to talk to you, to motivate you, to inspire you to read one of the most amazing books ever written. That's right, I'm talking about Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I'm not talking about the stupid movies that everybody's tried to recreate that don't do this book justice. I'm talking about the actual book. Now, this is one book that I highly recommend you read on your phone or on a tablet, because the language that she writes in is a little bit older, and there are certain words that she uses that you won't be familiar with unless you're able to look them up and get the definitions for them. But I promise you, this is a really, really good book and worth taking the time to read. Now, I know that a lot of you are being told you have to read this as part of some curriculum. And so, as I say with every book, I'm really sorry that you're being forced to read this book. I too was forced to read it the first time, just like you might be being forced to read it. Only for me, I was in the 7th grade. It was the summer as I was going into the 8th grade. And I had done some things in the 7th grade that really irritated my dad, hurt his feelings, pissed him off, all those good things. So as a punishment, he made me read 3 books that summer. The first was 2 Years Before the Mast by Henry H. Dana, which at the time I absolutely hated. It was super boring and dry, not recommended. And then he made me read Frankenstein. Now, the only reason I was a little bit motivated to read Frankenstein is because I'd seen all the different horror movies, right? Well, the book is nothing like these movies. The book was really, really good. But because my dad was making me read it, I was like, F that, I don't want to read this. I don't like this book. It's terrible because you're making me read it. So if you're being made to read this because you're in a high school class or a college class, I'm really sorry. Find a way to trick your brain into reading this book because it is full of insight. It is really, really deep, and it's worth your time to read it. Now, when I read it a few years ago for the 3rd time, I was floored. This book, seriously, if somebody had been smart, they'd have written the story of Frankenstein, but from the point of view from like an industrialist or like a farm owner, because let's be honest, Frankenstein could have been monetized. We could have put that guy to work. He could have done the work of like 10 or 11 men. I mean, there's parts of the story where it describes him jumping, and it reminds me of like how in today's movies, like The Incredible Hulk can jump for miles and miles at a time. I think at one point Frankenstein's rowing a boat. It's like a speedboat. Like he'd probably ski behind it. He was rowing so fast. Frankenstein was pretty smart too. If you think about it, like he learned how to read, learned how to write, learned how to speak. I don't know if he learned how to write. That could be a mistake on my part. But I know he learned how to read and he learned how to speak through observing and watching the family that he lived with. You could tell that Frankenstein was really like a gentle giant, you know. He wanted what everybody wants. That's connection, right? He wanted a spouse. He wanted a family. He wanted a tribe. In some ways, too, when I think about this book, like it would have been so cool if the writer had been like, at the end of the story, Frankenstein found a colony of blind people who didn't care how he looked. Because he could have done a lot of good for those people. You know, he was very, very into helping. That family that he lived by, you know, he would do all their chores in the middle of the night and do things to help them that they didn't know about. The story has a lot of hope, right? Sadly, too, the only horror in the stories and in Frankenstein are the people. And we'd like to think that we've progressed, but we haven't, you know. The people were abhorred by the way he looked, you know, by his outward appearance. And again, today we like to think that we're so refined. We're so much more educated. But we still judge people by the way they look, by maybe the color of their hair or the shape of their face, or maybe it's the shape of their bodies. We're very quick to pass judgments like that. The real horror of Frankenstein, the real monsters in the story, are the people. Victor Frankenstein, let's think about him for a minute. What was his motivation? His motivation was pure. It was clean. I want to overcome death. I want to make sure that nobody has to feel the sorrow of losing a loved one. That's a pretty noble endeavor, right? Like his whole focus was to like take out any kind of loss that comes from death. And he himself had suffered and had felt the pains of death early in his life and even in his teenage and young adult years. And we all applaud somebody who has this noble endeavor. And we see this motif of overcoming death in almost every story. Harry Potter, we see that Voldemort just wants to live forever, right? The Emperor in Star Wars, Palpatine, all of the things steps he took to ensure that he would never taste death. We see it in the Bible, where the whole thing is that Jesus Christ overcame death so that we could live eternally with God. Victor Frankenstein didn't want anything different than that. But we see an interesting twist that, again, here you have this creator, and the creature that he creates, once he sees it, he himself, Victor Frankenstein, is abhorred by the outward appearance of the creature. Now, in the book, they call him the monster, or they also call him the demon. And it's sad that that's how they describe him, because I think as you read the story, you start to realize that, again, the real monsters and the real demons are the people that judge the creature only on the basis of his outward appearance. There's a lot more to the story. There's a lot of opposition. Another thing that I really found interesting about the story is Dr. Frankenstein was very single-minded. For his time at the university, he didn't sleep, he didn't eat, he didn't enjoy it. He just worked. And that single-minded focus is what led him to create life. And again, in so many ways, we applaud that in an athlete. We applaud that in a business owner. We applaud that in a doctor who finds a cure or finds a solution to a very tragic problem. But again, we see this motif of the creator and then the creature being rejected by the creator. I know people that feel that they've been let down by God. They believe in God. They believe that he is their heavenly father. They believe that he is their creator. But when life gets hard, they feel abandoned by God. And that's a common motif as well. This abandonment by our creator, who supposedly loves us perfectly, but we feel so alone. And the creature feels alone. And it is insightful that he does come to his creator, and he opens up his heart and his soul to the creator. And for a brief minute, he convinces the creator to do what he wants, which is to build him or create for him a spouse. So we see the human element to this story. It's not a super long story. There is a lot of description. Mary Shelley does a great job describing what's going on in each particular scene in the book. I do highly recommend it. And much like in all my other videos, I would say if I can just inspire one person to read this story, and then you take a minute to put in the comments below what you thought of the story, what you got out of the story, not because you're being forced to read it, but because you're choosing to read it, it would just make my day. And I'm sure I'd take the time to respond back. If you've already read the story and you want to leave a comment, that would be cool too. I'd love to get other people's insights. I'm not the end-all be-all of book reading and book reporting, but I do always seek to get more insight from each of you. And so I thank you for that. I thank you for watching my video, taking the time to watch it to the end. And again, thank you if you do leave a comment, or if you don't, doesn't matter to me. But happy reading. Hope you read some more books. I'll put some more books up here, and hope I can be an inspiration to others.